Let's start from where you discovered that you love writing, and then join it with where you decided that that's what you're going to pursue.
I don't know whether there was a point of discovery or a certain place I would say that this is the point I learned that I would write. But as early as the days we used to write compositions and essays in school, I used to be ranked highly in my class. Like out of 40, I would get 38 and 37. I didn't quite think of it as a talent or as a gift up until I think 2018, when I left my job in a certain bank, and then out of the boredom that comes with joblessness and the long hours of idleness, I decided to write. And then I started telling stories on social media and a blog that I used to run. And I would say writing found me. I wouldn't say I found writing. It is something that I fitted into, even without realizing. By the time I was realizing that now I had become a writer, I had people already calling me a writer and a storyteller. So I would say I didn't discover, there's no particular time I discovered that I would write. But when I decided that I would, write, I think the earliest I can remember is 2018 August. Yes.
Okay. So I know you are a banker by profession, and
Yes.
Do you have any formal writing experience training?
No, I have not been trained. I have only attended a very short course, a masterclass by Biko Zulu. By then, I had a book out. I was running a blog. I was contributing in a certain daily, and I was also contributing in a certain forum run by Safaricom. So I went for that course as a value addition and not really as maybe a jumpstart to my career.
So from 2018 is when you started writing for your blog, writing for a local newspaper, and now Safaricom. Yes. So those are just online platforms. And tell us about your social media growing.
Two things. Huh? When I started writing, I would tell those stories on social media. Most of them were just a compilation of personal experiences, or in very many instances, things that I had seen people go through, but because people value and treasure anonymity, I would package them as things that happened to me. And with that, people started reading and started inviting their friends to follow my account and to read my stories. It necessitated me to open a page, because now with the Kawaida profile, you realize there is a limit. These days, they allow people to follow an account, but there was a time when you could only get to 5,000. And I opened a page, and people followed the page, and they have been reading stories there ever since.
Now you've written so many stories. Let's talk about what inspires you in terms of when you started writing stories. What was inspiring you? What was going through your mind? How were you building up your stories?
The things that I see, I am a very observant person. Whenever I am seated, or whenever I'm walking, whenever I'm driving, I am just looking at things, and I see those things as potential stories. Somebody says that everything is a story, and my go-to phrase is, because stories have to be told. And the way I live my life is I look at everything as a potential story. And so my inspiration majorly comes from anything that happens around me. I do not have a very Solomonic answer to this question, but anything that happens around me, is a potential story content.
Right. I like the fact that you use the term Solomonic answer. But also, being an avid reader of your Facebook page is true. I see how you relate everything to what you're going through, and I find that most endearing. And probably that's why you have a high engagement rate. I think people feel like they know you, although they don't see you. So anyway, how do you manage that? How do you manage to remain anonymous and still engage and retain this crowd of following?
I get asked that question a lot. When I started, I wasn't really anonymous. I used to have photos on my social media everywhere, but then I got to a place where I discovered something that has been very instrumental in my writing, that what I want out there is not me. I want people to interact with my stories. And therefore, I got a pseudonym, Ndugu Abisai, because that is not my name, my official name. So I got a pseudonym and pulled down all my photos. I still see some tags from some friends out there, people that I have met before I became anonymous, in quotes, that had taken photos of me or photos with me and tagged me on Facebook. I still see them because they didn't pull them down. But those that are very close to me, I asked them to pull any digital footprint of my face so that we can start this afresh. So how am I able to live this, for lack of a better phrase, two lives? I ensure that all I want to direct my attention to is my writing. And therefore, as people come to my timeline, some people are curious. Of course, they would want to see my face. They would want to know who I really am. But over the years, the people that have been following me or interacting with my content have since come to understand that I want you to interact with me on the basis of my skill and talent in writing, and only that.
And I also find that to be a bit clashing, because you draw so much interest into who you are as a person because of your stories, because someone wants to picture you stranded in traffic or doing this or doing that when you're telling your story. But then on the other hand, they can't really see you, so I guess they can build any character in their mind that they want to. Maybe that also plays well for you. Who knows? And so even your real name, you don't want that known.
I say it out there oftenly. My name is Peter Muigai Mwangi.
Okay. And here's the other also thing that you do. You have a podcast, right? Your friends, and you have live recording.
Yes.
And do you show your face? Unfortunately, I haven't been to one of them, but do you show your face during the live recording? Or how do you continue to maintain your anonymity even on live recording?
A very good or bad thing happened just after I had started writing. I've told you I started writing in 2018, but professionally, I would say I started writing in 2019, at the end of 2019. Now, that should be November, December. Then in 2020, COVID happened and people had to wear masks. And so for me, it was a saving grace, because right now I appear in public, mostly in many public forums, with my mask and cap on, so that I give you a piece of me, and you still, there's still this wall of mystery that exists, because again, you won't restrict people from taking photos of you. I have had instances where I went for book signing and a person fished out their phones and started recording. And I had to tell them, this is not something I want. And I could tell they were offended because it's something they wanted to own. But I also say, if really I wanted my face to be out there, I would be the first person to post it. And so during the live recordings, we have held 3 so far. And during all those functions, I had my cape on and my mask on.
I really have to commend you for stopping someone from recording you, because with all these smartphones, it's really hard to stop people from really putting your picture out there, even when you've decided you do not want that digital footprint. So yeah, well done. Now let's go back to your writing. We've shed a little bit of light on who you are in terms of who you want to be known as an anonymous writer. Now you're writing for the blogs and for your blog, which is since dead, right? Now you're writing only on Facebook. Facebook. Why don't you tell us what you're writing right now? And should we combine it with your first book?
Right now, I have 3 projects. I have a solo book that is coming out early 2023. I have an anthology of short stories by myself and other writers. And the 3 of us, the people that run the podcast with no name, have a book that should come out latest next year, 2023, April. So, and also I am writing for the Business Daily. And soon, though I don't know whether I should say this, but I might write for another local daily. So those are the things I'm working currently on. So whatever I'm doing on Facebook is majorly me flexing my muscles, because I believe every day I must write, I must tell stories. I consider myself more of a storyteller than a writer. I only appear as a writer when I need to get paid, because bills need to get paid. Yes.
But then now for the layman, for ordinary people, I think I'd classify myself there. What is this difference between being a writer and a storyteller? Because it sounds the same for some of us.
Yeah. I would say the structures around writing. You see, the way you have seen me write on, especially on Facebook, it's as almost it is almost as if there are no rules to it. You know, I'll throw in a Kikuyu phrase, I'll throw in a Swahili sentence here or there. I would even do an entire paragraph in Swahili, something that conventionally is not something that is very common. I know other writers will use this as a stylistic device, but I don't use it as a stylistic device. I use it as an enhancement to my storytelling. So the difference between storytelling really and writing is a very thin line. And I think that thin line could be defined as the structures that come with the traditional conventional writing. You have to respect the rules of grammar. You have to have proper construction of sentences. You have to paragraph your work. You have to do all these things. Of course, because I want it to be very easy for you to read, I will paragraph, I will punctuate, I will space my sentences, I'll give you a breather in between. But much more than this, I package this writing as if I was talking to you.
Okay, so you've also mentioned 3 books. I know the anthology of short stories, that one has been published. You're done with it. I've seen that you're promoting it. Could you talk a little bit about it?
That book, When a Stranger Called, the book I talked about earlier is now the second project. That was our first project, When a Stranger Called. I got interested in it, or I got inducted into this project in 2018. Around the same time I had quit my job. A friend of mine that is also a writer and also a contributor in the book reached out and asked me if I would want to be part of the project. They had already the exact number they wanted, but at the last minute, somebody pulled out, and therefore they needed a replacement. So I came in as a replacement to that person that had left. And I think that was very instrumental in what I did thereafter, because it now introduced me to the people or to readers as a person that could go beyond telling stories on Facebook and on blogs. So we came together, 13 of us, to write 14 stories. One of us did two stories. It was, I think, the first project of its kind. Of course, there had been another anthology that had been released just before we released ours, but we released it on the first day of September 2020. It is a project that took us, I think, 2 years, but mostly was delayed by the pandemic because we had planned to launch it in January of 2020. Then we had editorial issues, then moved to March. Then with March came all these restrictions and stuff. But to summarize all that, it's a project that was very successful. It is one of a kind because we came together virtually. All of us have never met. Thereafter, some of us, the contributors, have met, but at the time of publishing, most of us had not physically met.
So how are the stories related, and what was your experience writing for the first time for a book?
It was thematic. We decided, we settled on themes, or we settled on a common central theme: urban love stories. And my experience was great because I wrote I wrote a story that I had seen, not personally experienced, but I had heard so many times about, or I had seen other people experiencing. And when I read throughout the book, I see similar experiences that I can relate to. You see, when somebody tells a story and you say, so and so has also gone through the same thing. So our focus was on this central theme, but of course we gave liberty to writers to go as far as they could. But somehow you found yourself getting attracted to the centerpiece that was the theme, and that theme was urban love stories.
Right. And now tell me also a little bit about the book that you're writing on your own, and the book that you're writing with your friends that you're doing the podcast with.
Oh, so let me start with the project I'm doing with Eddie and Brian Banacho. It's basically I wouldn't say it's a compilation of the stories we've told, but it is something similar to the stories we tell on the podcast, but now in a written format. The way you will listen to us talk on the podcast, or at times write on our individual pages, we thought it would be important for someone or some people that do not listen to the podcast to access such stories in written format. And of course, it is a way of preservation, story preservation, because once a story is written, it goes beyond you. It's like the spoken word. Once it is said out there and you have released it, it goes beyond you. For my personal project, 18 years ago, coming December, I lost my mother. And I have never thought about writing a story that involved my mother, or writing a story that tells that my mother is no longer here. Because even when I tell stories on Facebook, I'll just tell as if she's still alive. And I got to a place early this year where we discussed about the losses we had encountered in life on the podcast. And I thought to myself, why not also document this, the 18 years I have lived without my mother, and now coming into adulthood and experiencing adulthood like an adult, but without a mother, because I also feel the people that have had the privilege of having their parents way into their adulthood, there is a relationship I have seen people share. They come to a place where they begin to appreciate the parents that have raised them and the parents that have been there. And it is something that I want to document. I don't want it to be a very sad book. I want it to, of course, have the humor that I I normally employ when I'm writing stories, but also be very real and candid of the experience for the last 18 years.
All right. So it's a non-fiction.
I would say entirely it is a non-fiction.
I'm really sorry for the loss of your mom. And
it is okay,
I'm looking forward to reading this story. With your experience publishing, did you self-publish the books, or did you use a publisher?
We self-published, and from the look of things, even the other projects, we will also go the self-publishing way.
Is that a preference? Could you walk me through it a little bit, why you prefer that over working with a publisher?
It was a preference for the first project, because at the time we sat down and decided that we needed to do a book, or at the time the team sat down and decided they needed to do a book, even before I joined the team, they had weighed options of going through an established publisher, but there has always been this fear that, and I have seen it exuded by other writers, that when you go to a publisher, your manuscript stands the risk of being, in their dusty shelves for months, sometimes even for years. And self-publishing is easy. Of course, with the right checks and balances, you get a very good designer, you get a very good editor, you get a good proofreader. You are essentially doing everything that a publisher can do. And now you are able, because what happens in the publishing firm is that the publisher will now act as your contact between you and the reader. Essentially, they are a broker. They create a bridge between you and the reader. And therefore, it sorts of lifts some good burden from your shoulders, but also places some good burden on your shoulder, in the sense that you might see your book not selling out there, and you know that you can sell it, but you are restricted because the publisher has exclusive rights of telling people that this book is out, go and buy it. So self-publishing is a preference, and I have seen it so much even with other writers locally. But also, if one can find it easy with getting published by or through an established publishing house or a press, then that is also a good option. Because again, with self-publishing, there is that challenge of, I am following the printer, I am following the guy that is supposed to get me a new batch of books from the printer to my storage, or those kind of things. So it's really a dichotomy that balances in the middle. There are pros and cons to each of these ways of doing it. But from the look of things, I'm going to be self-published for quite some time.
Yeah, I can imagine the processes of just finding an editor, finding a graphics designer for the cover, and also marketing and trying to find bookshops and maybe online platforms to sell. Which also brings me to a very important question, I would think. Who is your support system? Who do you trust to take a look at your book and tell you, hey, I think it sounds good and you're going the right direction? Who has held your hands? Who is your biggest supporter in your writing?
I wouldn't put a name to it, but I have a host of friends that will tell me, even without asking, that I feel like what you have written is unlike you. I have a friend of mine that we don't talk as often as we should, but whenever she spots something that is off or something that is good in my writing, she will say, her name is Njeri Nderi. She has worked in the media industry for some time, and therefore her critiquing my work, or her looking at my work with a very keen eye, is a very good privilege, because she's been part of the editorial processes of major dailies and even news items that we consume. So it is a person that I trust. Other than her, I have a list of so many other friends that will tell me when they feel like I am not doing much in terms of the potential they see in me, or they will tell me that this with this post or this week, you have really outdone yourself. And of course, first in line will be my two friends, Eddie Ashoya and Brian Banacho. It's sort of a peer review group where we look at each other's work and we critique, or we applaud each other's efforts.
I'm really happy to hear that, because writing can be such a lonely journey. But also there's something that you mentioned. You said you have to pay rent, so it means working for a local daily or media house. So what would you say that the writing does not pay, the publishing the books? It doesn't pay?
I would want to refute that. I see it a lot out here. And from 2020, ever since we published that book, I would have as well not have sought any other piece of work. I would as well be comfortable in just selling the books, because what that book has taught me is that people read. They only want for the product to be packaged in a way they like. And that is the main lesson that I have learned in pushing for our book out there. When we released that book, I didn't believe it would sell past 100 copies. We are counting about 3,000 now. And that, by local standards, is not a mean feat, because we've seen authors that released books and they didn't sell 100 books. Then a year later, they released another one and they didn't sell past 50 books. What we have done with that book is encourage local authors to package their content in books and push it out there. And by extension, expect that pushing their content in these books is something that can earn them a living. And I'm happy to say that writing pays. You can survive entirely by writing books.
Okay, I'm really happy to hear that. What would you say to you would be success to you as a writer? What would you say is success to you? You'd sit and say, "Oh, writing, I'm a successful writer." What would you call that?
I see it every day, and I see the interactions and the responses that come to my DMs. As I have told you before, I have a bias that is very dominating in my life. I consider myself a storyteller more than a writer, and for me, I tell stories so that people could feel lighter about themselves. People can laugh, people can be happy. And I see it every day. And for me, that is success. When a story makes you happier than you were 5 minutes ago, then for me, it is success. And I am glad that I am living in this stage in my life where people come to me and tell me that I come here every day to relieve stress, or I interact with your stories. I look at you every day, or I look at your page every day so that I could feel better, or I could be happier about things.
And if you could meet just one writer out there that you really admire and have a sit down with them, who would that be?
That would be Tom Junod. He's a columnist right now in the ESPN. He used to write for the GQ. He's also written briefly for the Athletic and the Esquire magazine. His prose, hey, that person can write. I would want you to read a story by him, The Falling Man. The Falling Man is a story he did about September 11, the World Trade Center Twin Tower plane crash or whatever. And the way he tells that story, you would actually feel like you are standing right under World Trade Center. And for me, that is an achievement. When I am able to tell a story and make you feel like you are in the story, that for me is admirable, and that's what I admire about Tom.
Yeah, and what is the best advice that you've ever received, and what advice would you give an up-and-coming writer or even an established writer?
Mm-hmm. I would tell you what Tom told me 2 years ago, because I DM'd him on Facebook. He told me, get a notebook, write every day. And I have done that. I don't have a notebook yet, but I write every day. So I use my social media as my notebook. Every day, make sure that you write. It's like an exercise. For people that want to be fit, they understand that every day they must wake up and probably jog or run or walk or go to the gym. Every day you must write.
And what does the future look like for you?
I will write more. I used to say that one day I will write for the New York Times, and that is where I want to go.
What are some of the risks that you've taken as a writer, and did they pay off?
I would say as a writer, I have gone into a project that I didn't quite know how it would end. And I think this is just professional risk in every work. Like when now I started working for the Daily, you will go to an interview, or for an interview to a place that you don't understand, whose geography you don't know. You might not know the immediate risks that you will face there, but you go. I remember one time when I started working with Safaricom, they had told me to go to Turkana, and around that time, there were bandits around in that region. Of course, I would fly there, but there were bandits and all these things. And the thing I was going to cover was a story about how network coverage has changed lives for people that lived in a very remote place in Turkana. And for me, I would say that is a risk, one of the many risks that I have taken as a writer, apart from now the very general risk that I quit my job, not to start writing, but immediately I quit my job, I started writing. So I got right into something that I didn't know, something that was not promising a pay, and something that didn't quite look as though it had a future.
Would you say that writing has changed who you are? And if it has, in what ways?
I would say it has made me a little bit more observant, and it has added a lot of empathy to me, or on me, because I have met people through this writing that are willing to tell very personal stories so that I could write them. I remember in 2020, end of 2020, I ran a series that I called Your 2020 Stories. And 2020 was quite a year for so many people. There were massive job losses, people lost loved ones, and so many things happened. And as I was going through the emails and the stories that were sent to me, I began to realize that there is quite a lot that can be told in stories. And there's quite a lot of healing, and there's quite a lot of unpacking that a story can do to people. And for me, I became that platform, although very briefly, because then I was going through another personal turmoil. So I couldn't hold space for so many people and so many stories, but I have since learned to be empathetical and to understand that at any point in time, people could, people could be going through a lot of issues, and it is through telling these stories that some of them unpack, and by extension, attain healing.
I feel your nature of storytelling is really impactful because you're not just feeding people on social media on stories, you're also listening to them and reading their stories and sharing them out. And I feel that's a really powerful tool. Would you say you'd like to develop your stories into a movie? And if you would, if that's something you would see, which actor would you like?
Well, it is an interesting thing. Yes, I would love to develop some of these stories that I tell into a movie. And I would really love to have I don't know if this is her real name, but she's I see her on social media, Kate actress.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
Catherine Kamau.
Yeah.
I like the way she brings out. I mean, I have seen her on set, and I know that the writer achieved everything they intended to achieve with the script that was played or that was showcased by Kate actress. So for me, I would love that. I would also think of a local actor called Nyakundi Isaboke. He was part of the cast of, I think, Maria. Yes, Nyakundi Isaboke. They have an ensemble of very talented writers. And who else? Makbul Mohammed. And it's because I look up to him as a great actor. Not that I want to be an actor, but I really respect him and his craft.
Yes, I mean, there's a very thin line between now, when you're a storyteller and you're having someone bring out your story, it's also something amazing. Would you say that your podcast is also a platform that is helping you in terms of telling your story?
Yes, in this way. The podcast is a very spontaneous platform of storytelling. One thing that we tell people is that we have never sat and planned what stories we would tell. We wing these stories. We get to studio on Friday and we decide 2 minutes before we go on record that these are the stories we are going to tell. And everybody has to remember, like very fast, of a story that is relevant to the topic of the day. And for me, that spontaneity is a very good tool that enables or empowers you to be very genuine and authentic in your storytelling craft. It reminds you that you are a story waiting to happen, and everything is a story. And it gives you the ability to transform that story or that event or incident into a powerful story and to coin it the way you want. If you want it to sound humorous, you have the power in your hands. If you want it to be sad, if you want to evoke emotions a lot, then you have the power, although it is very spontaneous. So you have to know how to work the power out to your favor.
I see you have a lot of fans for the podcast.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask one last question. In terms of accessing now the anthology of short stories and their future books, and also coming in for the live recording of the podcast, if someone wants that, the only platform to access is Ndugu Abisai on Facebook, or do you have other platforms?
For the books, you can access them online via, there's a bookshop called Nuria Bookshop currently in Nairobi. That is our biggest distributor. You can find them in Naivas, in Eldoret, in Nakuru. You can find the books at Patmat Bookshop in Nakuru and Ereto Bookshop in Nakuru also. And I forget the name of a certain bookstore in Eldoret that also stocks the books. In terms of the podcasts, we are on Spotify and we post as much. Spotify is a streaming site. It's a streaming platform for music, podcast, and all, voice related art curations. So you find us on Spotify. We share our links across all our social media, especially the podcast. You don't just find them on my timeline or on my platform. You find them on Eddie's, on Brian, and on our page. But soon we will have our website where people can easily access episodes, current and old, and even see maybe a calendar of events that we are planning, and maybe engagement that we want to have with our fans.
Right. I know the podcast name is The Podcast Without a Name, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Asante sana.
I'm looking forward to just seeing more works from you and continuing your engagement on social media. It's really powerful. Asante sana for your time.